Historically, Iowa was dominated by prairies, with woodlands primarily along streams and waterways, and in upland areas like oak savannas and oak hickory woodlands. However, there were a lot of woodlands along our streams and wetland areas, our riparian zones, as well as some upland oak savannas, upland oak hickory forests. Unfortunately, a lot of these areas have been degraded over time and now have been replaced with early successional species, invasive understories, as well as just scrublands. This has been a detriment to our habitat, clean air and water, and resiliency in a changing environment.
Really the focus is to, is to go through and to biologically diversify the stands. Iowa is known for its oak and hickory habitat. That is, one of the main focuses. Since 1990, there was, the forest typing was 37% oak hickory in Iowa. It plummeted in 2008 to around 26%. This is due to row crop agriculture and also to grazing, primarily grazing. Grazing focuses in the state. It has usually no nutritional value for ruminant species. The little forestry that we have in Iowa are primarily based on oak hickory uplands, true oak hickory uplands. Those are the upland, that's one forest type, upland forest type, and then there's the upland mixed hardwood type. But the oak hickory is the most dominant in the state. And that's a mix of white oaks, bur oaks, red oaks, mixed in with a lot of your hickory species, so a lot of your butternut, sometimes your mocker nut, your bitternut, and your shagbark. Those are is one forest typing. Those ecosystems are relatively complex and harder to manage.
So what we have across the creek here is a perfect example of what this area looked like before we came through and opened it up, removed the thick understory of non-native materials. Now that we've opened it up, we've got some oak leaf litter, we can run fire through here, we can encourage the native understory to come back and encourage that native regeneration of the trees. So this is a popular ornamental that's escaped and is causing all sorts of havoc in our woodlands. It's called Oriental Bittersweet. It's very distinctive this time of year with the red and orange berries, which, like honeysuckle, the birds love to eat and spread throughout woodland areas. This stuff will wrap around branches and trees. It will climb up the trees, create a canopy that basically drags things down, covers things up with super thick mats of leaves in the summertime, blotting out the sun and really suffocating a lot of our native understory. So this is a good example of kind of an early successional woodland. Not a whole lot of oak species here, walnuts, maybe some catalpa, some hackberries. And what I've got behind me is a very common weed in Iowa's woodlands, honeysuckle. Bush honeysuckle tends to fill in these woodland areas, early successional, late successional. What it does is it stops not only the native herbaceous understory from coming in, but also inhibits the regeneration of older successional trees like our white oak and our bur oak that eventually would mature in these kinds of woodlands. So this honeysuckle is a major problem, and we really need to be able to open it up and then return preferably fire to these areas to help open these areas up. So what you can see over here is the honeysuckle's really kind of filled in this area. What we would want to do to restore these woodlands is initially come through and clear that honeysuckle out. You're going to have some regeneration. It's going to resprout. There's years worth of seed that's down in the soil, so you have to be ready for that continued management in order to bring this woodland back to some level of natural balance. So it's mid-November, late November, and this is a great time of year for assessing your woodlands for invasive species, because most of our invaders, common invaders in Iowa woodlands, are still green and still thriving this time of year. A lot of our native species have gone dormant, including the trees. Native undergrowth that would be coming in, the native alternatives to the greenery, the honeysuckle that you see behind me, has all gone dormant. The gooseberry, the dogwoods, viburnums, these even hazelnuts and those sorts of plants, they've all gone dormant. So this time of year, you can assess a woodland very easily by just seeing what's green still.
First step is with the site assessment. So just meeting with the client on site, walking their forest land, and just looking at a bunch of features. So looking at the native vegetation that's on site, whether it's a oak hickory forest, if it's a alluvial bottomland with more black walnut composition, green ash composition, and looking at the invasive species cover on the site, rating it from 1 to 10, 1 being the least, 10 being the most extreme. And going in, taking a look at it, determining size classes, age. So if you have a full-grown, co-dominant and dominant mature oak and hickory upland, and then your intermediate and your suppressed from ground level, the vertical structure, 6 foot down, is completely comprised of invasive species. Going in and trying to manage those invasive species, eradicate those species.
So now that we've opened this area up, we have a return of our native understory, but we also have a return of some of our weeds that we've gotten rid of. So here's some honeysuckle that is sprouted up from some seeds, undoubtedly. But we have the luxury in this area of having oak trees present already. And so they leave this oak leaf litter, which is considerably more substantial than other deciduous trees. And what that means is that this will be here through the winter and into the spring, and we can run fire through here to help suppress the return of these saplings and seedlings that are going to be problematic. And because they're green and the native understory is not, we don't harm the native understory when we run fire through here. In many ways, there's no going back to fully relying on the natural systems to clean our air and water. But we can support these systems. These systems are called ecosystem services. And by supporting these systems, we can support resiliency in a changing environment. Conservation, land management agencies and organizations, nonprofit organizations, are already doing this on a landscape level in many areas and are doing great work. But even more can be done on the local level. I'm talking about private lands, municipalities, even corporate campuses. Simple things can have an outsized effect, such as plant identification, learning the invasive species so that you can identify them early in your woodlands before they take over. Using native plant stock and native tree species in place of conventional species when it's an option can provide generations of ecosystem services. And if needed, know when and where to find professional help. Our challenge is to restore these altered landscapes and support these natural systems, because this is our greatest tool. With a few simple techniques, we can have a huge impact.